Hey guys, welcome to The Cutting Edge with G Money. Today on the podcast, we have a contemporary American visual artist who works across art, architecture, and performance. His work has been shown in museums and institutions worldwide, including the MoMA PS1 and the New Museum, New York, among others. Since 2013, he has developed a highly successful edition practice with global reach. In 2021, he was appointed Chief Brand Officer, helping to craft the universal NFT minting solution that better protects creators and collectors. Daniel Arsham. And alongside him, we have Jeff Gluck, who for more than a decade has been at the forefront of contemporary IP law in the fields of art and fashion, helping artists, designers, and content creators protect their livelihoods without the excessive costs of antiquated law firms. Now he is leading the team at CXIP to bring protection and verification to all artists in Web3. Hey guys, how you doing? Thank you for coming on the show.
Great, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So I guess let's just we'll dive right into it. I would love to know how you guys ended up in NFTs. I know, Daniel, you have obviously a long career as an artist. Like, how is it that you, I guess, got into crypto and then into NFTs? Because I know you had a 1 or 2 NFT drops last year that have been doing really well. So would love to hear your story of your NFT origin story.
Sure. So, kind of mid 2019, I had a couple meetings with the Winklevoss brothers who came over and were sort of pitching Nifty Gateway and the concept of NFTs generally. And the only thing that I was familiar with in that space were CryptoPunks at that period. And frankly,
what were your thoughts on CryptoPunks when you first saw them?
I thought the concept was really interesting. It felt very sort of Warholian to me, coming out of this idea of something that was very recognizable, kind of iconic, simplistic. The concept of the magnitude of units of them that had different characteristics, I thought was a new take on what an artwork could be in a certain respect. The value in them and the utility in them was unclear to me at that point. But one of them mentioned something at the end of that conversation, which was this concept of the smart contract and the idea that I think they said something like, you can make a painting that could change color every day. And shortly after that, we went into COVID. I spent a lot of time thinking about the potential in that and had a couple of conversations with people like Jeff, who really explained to me the utility value of the smart contract, both in terms of its ability to collect royalties, but also its ability to kind of create a programmable artwork. And in my own practice, I have varied in medium and material, but I've always done it when the medium itself could serve to further some concept within the work. And so when I finally did release my first NFT work, it was a work that utilized time within the piece itself. So it was a kind of sculptural work that existed within a space. And over the course of a year, in tandem with the seasons, the work actually disintegrates, right? It erodes and then reforms. And in the background, you have a garden. So in the summer, or in spring, the birds are chirping, there's flowers. And in winter now, if you go view this work, it's snowing, right? In this mini kind of universe. And I thought that that was a way to create something that I couldn't create in the physical world, right? Which added a kind of utility value to the artwork.
Right. And I think that's awesome. I know that drop was on Nifty, correct?
Yes, all of them have been actually up to this point. And I think part of the thing for me also about entering the space was there were so many creators in it who were native to it. And I felt like I needed to really understand that community and what were the driving factors behind it. So I spent a lot of time in different Discords, just watching actually and seeing what the community was doing before I actually entered the space.
Right. Yeah. And I know from my personal experience, I feel like you've been super thoughtful with your entry, right? Because I remember I think it was almost a year ago at this point was the first time we actually spoke.
Yeah.
And, we were talking about your project and, the things that you were looking to do and the ideas you had. And so I think it's been really cool because I think a lot of times, especially early last year, there were a lot of creators that were just like, oh, let me make something, right? And drop it. And, you were acting before you could really think things through. And I think that's kind of, did you and Jeff know each other before CXIP and NFTs?
Yeah, Jeff has represented a lot of artists in copyright litigation that I'm friends with, and I've known about his work in that space. So yeah, we knew each other beforehand.
Cool. And I'll just pause right there for a second to kind of talk to you, Jeff, about your history, how you ended up going from a copyright lawyer to starting this protocol and your thoughts there. Because I know, again, we had really good conversations early on, and I really liked the way you were approaching the space. So, how did you end up in the space?
Yeah, I've been an intellectual property litigator for about 15 years, focusing on representing artists, protect their rights, a lot of copyright litigation, trademark litigation. So when a company comes in and uses artwork without permission, puts it on product, puts it in advertising without permission from the artist, those are the cases that we've been focusing on litigating over the years, helping to reshape artist rights laws. I've done a lot of work around street art, protection for outdoor artwork, and so forth. About a year ago, really almost a little bit over a year ago at this point, it was really strange. There was out of nowhere like a crescendo of activity of clients of mine, creators reaching out to me and saying various things like, people are taking screenshots of my work and selling it as NFTs, or a collector of mine who bought a canvas painting from me last year now thinks that they have the rights to auction an NFT of that painting, and what's going on here. And it reminded me a lot of actually street art about a decade ago, when street art started to become this big mainstream thing that all the corporations and advertisers wanted to leverage. There was a lot of confusion around, if something is in public, can you use it? What are the rights? And so this really reminded me of like, there's this new frontier now. There's all these IP questions around it. And at that point, I was prompted to really dive in and immerse myself, initially just because I wanted to be a better lawyer and be able to answer these questions and properly counsel them and advise them in what was going on around the IP confusion. But during that exercise, I sort of went down the rabbit hole and became fascinated with the opportunity that I saw to really empower artists by leveraging this new technology. But I was really taken aback by how fragmented and incompatible the ecosystem appeared to be. So a lot of these early marketplaces, and they still are mostly this way, they design themselves to be thinly veiled walled gardens. They encourage the NFTs to kind of stay within their own borders. They really want to try to exert some form of control over the whole process, from minting to sale to resale. And, I started to notice things like, if the NFT leaves the primary minting marketplace and is resold into like OpenSea or Rarible, for example, then that the resale royalty is breaking. It's not going back to the creator. I noticed thousands of creators using shared centralized marketplace contracts. So what happens there is you have thousands and thousands of NFTs on chain where the provenance says created by marketplace, created by marketplace. You certainly wouldn't want to go buy, a Rolex where the serial number says, created by watch shop. So, there were issues around provenance, royalties, and when I saw these things, I really felt like there was an opportunity to innovate and kind of fix these things in a way that helped support and protect and empower creators. And I didn't want this new exciting space to grow in the wrong direction. So I wanted to come in and put my efforts behind creating technology that was more focused on supporting from a creator perspective.
Right. Okay, cool. So then I guess, so for those that are not very familiar with what Chip does, can you give us like, I guess, a quick summary of exactly what it is that, if I'm a creator and I come to Chip, what are the services that I can expect to utilize on the platform?
Yeah, the core product with Chip is self-service, no code NFT minting for creators, where you get your own creator-owned contract. We have a royalty solution that's embedded that empowers the creator to collect all of their resale royalties across all secondary marketplaces unbroken. So you get continuous royalties. You're getting your own creator-owned contract that you own, perfect on-chain provenance, true creative ownership, and we're interoperable with all the major marketplaces. So you come to Chip, which is a neutral platform, mint your NFT in a very independent, sovereign manner, and then you choose where to then go and sell it. And that's really been an artist's journey historically, is first creating their work in a sovereign, independent way, having ownership of the full creation, and then deciding, all right, where do I want to go commercialize this and where do I want to sell it? Up till now, creators, the first choice that they've had to make is, which marketplace do I have to go lock myself into, or which, in order just to mint an NFT. And so there's a narrative of decoupling minting from the marketplaces. And so that's where Chip fits in, with giving creators a very easy to use, no code, self-service tool to mint NFTs, get their own personal contracts, and sell them wherever they like. That's the core product.
Right. And that makes total sense. And so Daniel, because I know you did your drops on Nifty, at what point were you like, I want my own provenance, right? Because obviously as an artist, this is super important to you. Like how soon afterwards? Because I see that happens. That's like the story arc a lot for a lot of artists, right? They come in, they do something on a centralized platform, whether it be Nifty, OpenSea, or Rarible or whatever. They're like, okay, cool. Like I made an NFT, and then they realize, oh wait, this isn't the provenance that I wanted, right? And so then at that point, it starts the journey where up until now, you have to be technical, right? You have to hire a developer to make the smart contract, or you have to be technical yourself to understand it. At what point along your journey were you like, oh, well, I want this from my contract, from my address?
Yeah. So the first work that I minted is a work called Eroding Rome 1 year, and that work was minted through Nifty Gateway. CHIP was a little over a year ago now, so CHIP was in its infancy at that point. And part of the discussion with Jeff came about, sort of explaining to me, which as an artist, I'm not trying to get in the weeds on like all of the mechanics of how this works. I would like things, I want to be able to create my work and find a way to release it to the world in a way that's seamless. And so the two issues that Jeff raised to me, one was that those works were being minted from a wallet that doesn't have my name on it. So when you trace it back, that first work is going to go back to Nifty's, what's the name of the wallet? Omnibus wallet, right? So that's one issue. And then the second issue, which came up, after that, the secondary market with those NFTs has been extremely healthy. I mean, I think some of them are up to like a 10x multiple, and the floor, I think the floor right now is a little above 4,000, but the trading volume was substantial, and I didn't know that a lot of that was happening off of Nifty's platform, right? So with this recent drop, all of those NFTs were minted with CHIP. I still released them through Nifty Gateway, but they came from my wallet, right? So if you go and you look at the source code, you can see that it came from me, and I'm also able to capture secondary market trading that happens in any platform.
Right. And that's awesome, right? And so, are you planning on using CHIP's technology for your minting processes going forward?
All of the NFTs that I create from now will be minted with CHIP.
Right,
I mean, if you go to the website, it's a very straightforward process. Like you don't really need to understand the mechanics behind it. It's basically they are minting from your wallet, which you create. They help you create the wallet, right? Or you can use a MetaMask wallet or whatever you've got already. And it's a relatively straightforward process. And then I bring it over to Nifty Gateway, and that's where it's released.
Right. Okay, that makes total sense. And so, yeah, Jeff, if you want to talk a little bit about the drop and the airdrop that's coming, and all of the things that you've been working on to build the community and the governance token, let's start going into that, right? Because I think one of the really cool things about CHIP is that it's creator first, right? And to your point, is like it's very focused on the creator, and I know that you've been very much working on building that community.
Yeah, and just to make a sort of a quick point, marketplaces are a very important part of this ecosystem. Like there's no, marketplaces are important and definitely have a place, right? But it's unnatural for the minting to occur at the marketplace level. Like marketplaces should really be focused on selling NFTs. To be doing the actual creation, the minting, and the selling and everything, at one specific marketplace, it doesn't really create a foundation for the most sort of interoperability as the space moves forward, right? Like, marketplaces can and will thrive, and there's going to be thousands of them. But the more that creators start to control their own minting process and have their own contract, then it becomes more of a natural ecosystem where the marketplaces are simply just focusing on sort of like, curating and marketing and selling NFTs.
To your point, right? I think a really good contemporary analogy is probably Amazon, right? Where even though Amazon is great, right, and it's an awesome marketplace, there's always that pushback when they start making like the Amazon branded products and they start pushing that, and like really, it's kind of like they're copying a brand that has already been successful, right? And to your point is like, I think that you want that separation, right? To give that creator the opportunity to do whatever they want on whatever platform they want.
Yeah, and several people that we work with have compared it to the concept in the music business of owning your own master recordings, versus a record label owning your own recordings and like sort of just kind of like licensing them back to you. Ownership over the smart contract is extraordinarily important. And if you're sort of like renting a smart contract from a centralized marketplace that thousands of other creators are kind of sharing with you, you're essentially at the whim of that marketplace, where if they make decisions, change directions, do certain things, and kind of change the formatting, your contract changes along with it. And there was a recent example. It was called Cargo, I believe, which is an NFT marketplace that got acquired and sort of started to close shop and dissolve. And everything that had been minted there was at risk of sort of like being lost. And there was no kind of permanent metadata storage. And, you know, if you're tied to a certain marketplace contract, you're tied to whatever happens to that marketplace in the long run. So yeah, getting back to, I think what you had originally asked, you know, what Daniel and I and the team are so excited and passionate about is the concept that minting is a public good. It's in the Web3 space. It's a creator's most important tool. If you think about metaverses expanding and you think about all these worlds being filled with all these digital assets and digital property rights, those are all NFTs. And what is more foundational and fundamental than minting infrastructure? And you know, it's a creator's like most important kind of tooling for this space. And so to that end, we really believe strongly that the creator community should have their own minting protocol that they shape, that they oversee, that they are incentivized and rewarded to use, that they can help build and help grow. And that's what we're embarking on with CHIP. And what we've done is we've scraped blockchain block by block to collect all of the addresses for every creator who's ever minted an NFT on Ethereum mainnet. It's about 1.6 million addresses. And this audience of verifiable creators, the pioneers of the space, people who have minted NFTs, made the space what it is, that is the group that's eligible to claim our upcoming airdrop and join us in shaping the minting protocol, overseeing it, participating in it, and having having an infrastructure layer that they can always ensure is being built in a way that protects them, empowers them, that they're getting the tooling that they need, they're helping guide where this, you know, where and how minting should go, and so we're really excited about that.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool concept, right? Because I think we've been seeing airdrops come, but a lot of them, I think it's people that are trying to compete at the marketplace level, right? With in OpenSea right. and Vampire Attack. And so I think it remains to be seen what happens there. But I think something that's actually focused for the creators and building a minting platform, right? Because I think that to your point is like that's a service that's needed. It's almost like a basic good, right? That will be required in the metaverse, right? Like I just in this conversation thinking about it. You know, it's like, what is going to happen to, and Daniel, I think this is a great question for you, is like, have you considered moving, let's say, your first Nifty drop over to, since that was not associated with your wallet, to, let's say, like a new contract where it's like a swap for swap to kind of have that provenance from yours? Or like, what's your thought process there as an artist and how that would work for you?
I mean, frankly, as all this stuff develops, it's changing so quickly that I don't even know where we're going to be in 3 months. You know, when I started the series, I initially conceived of 10 separate artworks, and the edition size is reducing. The final 10th work there will only be 50 of them, and in a similar way. Collectors who manage to acquire all 10 of them, I'm going to airdrop them an 11th NFT. So it's also creating this very small community of people who will manage to actually acquire that grouping. And I'm spending in some ways so much time on that 11th one because I know it's going to have this value that is sort of intangible, right? It's not something that people are paying for. It's really about community and what they've done to participate in this. The other potential I see is in the future, I think the marketplace maybe is important as a secondary. If we think about, my traditional editions, I've sold them always through my own website. There's a secondary market that exists on places like StockX, but there's potential in the future where I can have a chip, API that sits on my website, and I can mint and sell directly through my own site. And it doesn't have to go through the platform itself. And that's not going to work for every artist. But I think at a certain point that will be the way of doing it. I think art galleries, as they enter the space, are certainly going to be utilizing mechanics that Chip provides in order to have a native, whether it's a marketplace or like a sales channel, right? Same way that the art world works, right? People buy works, and at some point, a lot of them or some of them end up at auction houses like Christie's and Sotheby's.
And I think that's super important, right? Because I think that OpenSea is almost like the eBay, right? Where you can go on there and buy whatever you want. But you as an artist, right, you don't necessarily want your work being displayed next to like a random picture, some random JPEG, pixelated ape or whatever it is, right? And so like you want to have that very curated experience for your collectors, right? Like if I know I want to buy your piece, there's no reason for me to necessarily go on OpenSea and like type in your name and then get derivative works or whatever it is that will be out there. The same way that happens on eBay, right? That you'll be like, oh, like here's a sticker, or like whatever it is. It's like, well, that's not what I want, right? Like I want to go to the official spot where I can buy all just perfectly curated pieces by Daniel Arsham. And I think that that's where the world is headed to, right? Eventually, because as a creator, that's what you want. You want your perfectly curated experience for your collector.
Yeah, and I think Nifty Gateway in some ways is the first step in that idea of curation, right? They're doing, I guess, 1 or 2 drops a day. The artist, there's a provenance behind them. They do research about the artist and sort of display that information. But I do think at some point, the marketplaces are going to become more about secondary and not about first releases.
Something really interesting that I'll add here, and by the way, we do have an enterprise API that takes our engine and plugs it into like an existing e-commerce platform, like Shopify, for example, or any type of like existing Web 2 e-commerce. We have an API that provides them with like instant NFT minting and selling and plugs in our whole engine. So definitely doing a lot of stuff on the enterprise side as well for Chip. But one interesting thing about what we're talking about for marketplaces. Are you familiar with the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, DMCA? So have you seen, like if you see on platforms like Facebook or Pinterest where it says DMCA takedown notice, right? So what that is it's a statute that protects a passive platform like Facebook, Pinterest, a passive platform where users are generating content, and it shields the platform from legal liability for what the users are posting. So if somebody were to post intellectual property infringing content on Facebook or Pinterest, for example, the platform itself could not be held liable in litigation for whatever a user is posting. And the DMCA is important in that it shields these platforms from mountains of liability for whatever content is being posted all the time. Now, if the platform if the marketplace, an NFT marketplace, is doing the minting, and not only minting, but also curating, then they're not passive. And so all these NFT marketplaces are arguably not shielded from DMCA protection for whatever content NFTs are being sold, posted in their marketplaces. Now, like a lot of them have like the DMCA takedown structure implemented. So they're trying to use that to shield themselves. But by minting, they would be considered in aiding in the process of the creation of the infringing content. And by actively curating, they're not passive in what content is being shown. So this is going to be really important for the marketplaces to be aware of. And I think pretty soon we're going to start to see some litigation in court over infringing content, like on different NFT marketplaces. And we're going to see a lot of, I know of attorneys that have already taken cases, and there's a lot of stuff going on in terms of that, but it's going to be really interesting. And just to kind of cap off Daniel's point about, NFTs being sold like on his own site versus somewhere else. I mean, we're so early in this that I think fast forward out a year, even 2 years, there's just going to be NFTs sitting on Nike.com right next to a pair of sneakers and a t-shirt. And it's going to be fully merged and integrated into just like the normal shopping experience, where it's just going to become this normal thing that is ubiquitous. And there's not going to be all this kind of separation and uphill battles with like the technology and things like that.
The other thing I think that's going to come up is, if you go to eBay right now and you look and you search my name, right? There's going to be a whole mess of things on there, and probably about 1% of them are going to be fake things. Now, if you know my work, it's pretty easy to spot it. The price is dramatically different. The quality is very different. And a number of artists have dealt with that. Now, I think at some point, and we're just starting to conceive of how this might be possible and what the utility would be, but would be to use a chip contract to actually verify the authenticity of a physical world work, right? And you would know if it was real or not by tracing the wallet address, which would lead back to my wallet address. Like, Jeff was telling me there was a couple fake versions of some of the NFTs that I released on OpenSea. And it's pretty clear when you look at the wallet address that it has nothing to do with me, and the price is different. So anyone savvy enough, I doubt any of those actually sold. But this is a very clear way to establish provenance by looking and saying, did this come from my wallet or not? And if it didn't, then it's fake.
Right. Yeah. And it makes total sense. I get to touch on that point a little bit. How do you plan on linking the physical to the digital?
This is a question, is like, how do we actually do it, right? Is it done? There's been all kinds of discussion, like, is there an RFID chip that contains some data in that? I don't know the answer to it yet. I think a lot of people are exploring it. There's also potential to, for that to open up some additional content, right? If you buy a physical work, I have a release this Friday of a physical sculpture, right? In addition, imagine if you tied that to an NFT where the NFT itself has some other utility or some other content that's contained within it, plus it allows you to verify the provenance of the work. I think the question is, how do we, what is the linkage between those two things, or the vehicle for you to get from the physical into the digital?
And this concept is nothing new, right? I mean, look, think about Banksy, who for, how many, 20 years, right? Like, if you were to buy something from his proper studio called Pest Control, you were given a pest control certificate of authenticity that was really hard to duplicate, and was something that, you would never buy a Banksy work without the accompanying pest control certificate. And so, it's really conceptually the same type of thing, but now we're just leveraging blockchain technology to make it
it's one step further.
Right.
I mean, we do that too. Every physical artwork that comes out of my studio has a certificate of authenticity that's produced here. It has a hologram on it. It's pressed with, over my signature.
You can't duplicate that. That's,
it'd be very hard. It'd be very expensive to duplicate that. And the same thing is true for the editions. There's a holographic label on it, which oftentimes, if you see a fake, it doesn't contain that.
Right. How close are you to integrating, I guess, just using an NFT almost as a certificate of authenticity for your actual physicals?
We're just starting to think about how it can be done. And the real question, I think, is the link. Like, what is the link between the physical and the NFT? What contains it? I mean, I guess you could give somebody a cold wallet that contains it on that. If you lose that, it's like the whole point of the NFT is that you can't lose it.
Right.
So there's a question around that, but it will be figured out. And I think at some point later this year, it's going to start to happen a lot within the art world.
I have we can talk about this offline, but I've been thinking about that a lot, because when I first got into the space, one of the first projects I bought was the Beeple Everydays, which was in December. I'm messing up dates. December of 2020. Mm-hmm. And I remember going into the Discord afterwards and being like, how are you going to do? Because there was only a 6 to 8 week window of redemption. And I was like, well, what's going to happen after I redeem? And well, nothing. I'm like, well, but how am I going to keep the physical with the NFT, right? Because ultimately, as a collector, I want both, right? And I think long term, there's going to be more value in keeping both of them together rather than splitting them apart. And to me, this is a thing I've been thinking about literally since I got into the space because of that, right? It's and we see it all the time. I think I pay extra attention now to all these fake forgery documentaries and, whether it be wine or art or whatever.
Yeah.
And, it's there's a vested interest in confirming everything is real, right? Because there's just so much money at stake. But, but that doesn't necessarily make it real, right? Common consensus could tell you that it's real because, people are making money off of it here and there and they want it to be real. And I think that, to me, I think that's probably one of the most interesting use cases of the tech. But besides just I want to create a piece and have that live in a digital format, is how do you link those two together long term, so you have that provenance as a collector? you know. But yeah, I guess switching gears for a second, and I know this conversation has happened a lot in the space over the last couple months with regards to the Creative Commons license. And I know we've done a couple Twitter spaces about it where you guys have both been on. And I just, I think like each has a place in the case, right? Where, if I'm a creator and I want to own the IP, that's my right? Like, I think that there's been kind of, and I think crypto lives in a world of extremes, right? Where people are like, well, it worked for these guys, so everybody should do it. But I think it's very short-term in thinking. Like there's some things like personally, right? Like I wish punks had a Creative Commons license, right? Because then I would be able to do with my ape what I want to do. But I understand that Larva Labs is the creator of it, and that's what they chose to do. And that's fine. That's what I bought. And I knew what I did when I bought it. I wanted to get your guys' opinion on the Creative Commons license, what your thoughts are on it as a creator, and obviously as a platform that is focused on creators.
I'll go first. I think that this requires a real like fundamental shift in thinking about IP, and turning everything upside down and how you used to think about IP. So historically, IP has always been about guarding it, protecting it, selectively licensing it out, commercializing it in a very controlled way, and the value being derived from like the demand and the exclusivity of accessing that IP. But there's this interesting new way of thinking about it where there's more value that can accrue in unleashing that IP and giving it to the community, giving it to people to use and proliferate and post and share and create derivative works from and do, and in doing that, the IP then becomes ubiquitous and becomes a lot more valuable that way. And so think about in terms of Bored Apes, right? Like the moment that I realized that when you buy a Bored Ape, you get the IP rights, that's incredible. That's one of the best purchases anybody could ever make, because you could take that ape and you could walk right into Universal Studios or Sony or anywhere and be like, hey, let's go make a show. Let's go make a theme park. Let's make some merch. You have this asset that you can go commercialize. And in doing so, more value is accruing to the project creators and to the property overall itself. Really, really such a cool thing how that was rolled out. But with that said, like it's not for everybody, and it's important for certain creators to control their IP and not give Creative Commons CC0 licenses. And I don't think it's right to pressure everybody and saying like, oh, you have to do this or otherwise like it's bad or it's not cool. And like if you want to be in the Web3 space, you've got to give away your IP. I think that I don't subscribe to that. It's more about like a case by case basis, but it is interesting to embrace this new way of thinking about it.
Yeah, I think the most interesting part about this, and this is a little bit of a complex idea, is the blending of identity, like personal identity, with something that is purchased or selected, right? And with the case of Bored Apes, owning that IP, it's almost like your persona becomes that. I mean, G-Money, you've adopted, right, the ape as your sort of universe. Technically, you don't obviously own the IP to that, but nobody's stopping you from doing what you're doing now. The Bored Ape universe would allow, and actually people have done this, like Timbaland formed like a group like with that, right? And I think that has so many implications for the way that we think about our personas in this new digital universe, right? I think people in some ways are going to, especially from, these PFP projects, as those things become valuable as a kind of identity for people, right, to exist as a group within that, they're going to expect that when I purchase this, that is me. And it's almost like I have to be able to own how I'm represented in this new space. So I think there's huge possibilities for that. For an artist like myself, it would be challenging to create, for instance, a PFP project where I was using a license like that, because it would contain intellectual property that I've developed over the past 20 years. And it's the most difficult thing for me is I wouldn't want to create a situation where I would be like infringing on myself, So I think if I ever created a project like that, I would be careful to to create something that was entirely new, that wasn't based on any design language or artistic attributes that I had previously used in my work before.
Right.
And it's like Daniel, like think about it like this, right? When you do a Sony PlayStation controller edition, when you do a Pokemon, when you do a Porsche edition, right? Like when you do those things, you are accruing value back to those brands, back to those companies by reimagining, sort of reinterpreting, their essentially IP, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like that's kind of how I view it in a way. It's like you're a creator reinterpreting, reimagining third-party IP, and based on how incredible your execution is and your big audience and how desirable these things are, you're accruing substantial value back to these brands.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's like a different segment of IP law, which is more related to like fair use, right? Like, so
right.
A company like that created something, let's say like a basketball, right? Like a Spalding basketball as an example. The sculpture that I create, number one, it's not a basketball, right? It's a sculpture of a basketball. It does contain references to the original object, but it's been altered, right, through my artistic vehicle. And the argument there is that in order to be able to create that artistic gesture, I need to be able to reference the original, right? And that's where fair use comes in and allows me to use that original in the service of the creation of this artwork.
Yeah, absolutely. It's completely fair use, but nevertheless, like thinking about it in terms of like a creator using, inspiration or reference from a brand, like you're accruing value back to those brands. Like those brands,
right?
Right.
Ultimately love what you're doing because it's increasing their brand value, and that's sort of like what happens when people are going out, when Timberland's using apes to create a group and so forth. It's accruing value back, and that maybe it's not under the cloak of fair use because they actually do have the rights explicitly to do those things, but it's still sort of the same side
concept.
effect.
Yeah.
I think it's super interesting because I think we're kind of in that, and for the foreseeable future, we're probably going to be in that gray area, right? Where it's like, if I made a G-Money wearable, right, you can trace the provenance back to my wallet and be like, oh, this, somebody tries to make a fake, you obviously know because you can trace it back. But if I were to make a G-Money t-shirt, anybody can just screen print the T-Money. They can copy how I make it. So you really can't trace that provenance back, right? So I think I ultimately think we move towards a world where code is law, where it's like, hey, like, buyer beware. If you want to buy a Gucci bag, a digital version of it, guess what? You can go back to the digital, the Gucci wallet or the Gucci wallet address and be able to say, hey, this is from there. But in the real world, there's no physical component to do that yet. But I think over time, we probably go there, right? As the tech becomes more viable and cheaper, right? Because I'm sure you're looking at RFID chips for your physical, and then you're probably looking at like, wow, this costs way more than like I would think that it should cost, right? And that will go down over time.
Yeah.
I think we're like in that gray zone area, because I do think we move towards that over time, and that becomes the law where it's like, hey, like you bought a fake Gucci bag, like that's on you, right? Like you all you had to do was just check the ownership history, and you can go back to where that comes from.
Right.
But I think it takes some time to get there, So yeah, I think I really appreciate having you guys on. I want to be cognizant of your time, and I know that you guys are working on cool things. Jeff, we hooked up really early on, like last year, and I was really happy that I was really happy and excited with what you guys were doing, which is why I chose to angel into your initial seed round. And I've been really happy with the progress that you guys have been making with regards to really creating a good platform for creators to come in and really kind of feel like they're part of the community, as opposed to plugging into somebody else's walled garden and adding value to them. And is there anything besides the drop that's coming up? Anything else that I guess people that are part of the chip community should be looking forward towards?
Stay tuned. Lots of cool stuff coming up. And we appreciate your support, G. You've been such a important, influential voice in the space, and everything you've done on behalf of the space and creators as well is amazing. And just thanks for the time today. Happy to be here. Thanks to Daniel. And that's it.
All right,
yeah,
awesome.
I think any creators out there, go look at the chip website and see, how it works and what it can do. Because I think the utility value there now and in the future is only going to grow.
Own your contracts, own your future. That's what it's all about.
And one quick fun question before you guys go is, what are your favorite, each of you, like what's your favorite NFT that you currently own?
Jeff, go ahead.
That's a tough one. I mean, I love Daniel's latest release, the Porsches. It's so cool. I really loved that drop. I actually try to make, I'm a little bit different in that I like to collect from artists that I know and that I have like long relationships with. Like, for example, the artists Fail released some NFTs that I've collected. Like watching Jen Stark, who's a close friend and an amazing artist. Really loved her collections, and I personally get more excited about things that are not PFP projects, and so that's kind of what I've been focusing on.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the most interesting creators in the space, for in terms of its relationship with a kind of art historical context, for me is Pac's work, and thinking about the way that they integrate ideas that were present in a kind of larger art historical context since, I don't know, the last century into the work, and also the way that this recent project with the aggregation or the collection of, I can't remember what they called it, but I find all that stuff super fascinating.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that, guys. Again, thank you for coming on the show. Daniel, you said you have another NFT drop coming later in the year?
I'm working on the next, the final 4 actually, which would complete the 10.
Okay.
So it's going to depend on when I finish them, but sometime, before summer, I would say.
Okay, cool. Yeah, very much looking forward to it. And excited for everything that you guys are doing in the space. And, it's always fun to see you guys out and about and really supporting the NFT space and being loud advocates, especially Daniel, with your following in the traditional art world and pop culture, right? Like having people like yourself in the space is super important for kind of helping push the narrative forward in a great way. So
thank you.
Really grateful to have you guys on and thanks.
My pleasure. Talk to you soon.
All right, cool. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and we'll see you next week.